Hey divers, Alec, Peirce, Scuba. Welcome back to our ranch, our home, Diana's home and my own home, and to another Vintage Scuba playlist. I hope you're enjoying this. Well, I know you are. I know you are because I'm getting a lot of comments. If you're not, then just go to another YouTube. Simple. That's what I do. But hey, I know a lot of you are enjoying it. I love the comments. Please keep them coming. It's great. Questions and ideas in particular are really, really good. Today, as you know from the title, I'm going to spend a few minutes with you talking about board games. That's B-O-A-R-D, not B-O-R-E-D, board games. Now, today, you guys with Xbox and all the fancy stuff, you may call them board, B-O-R-E-D game, but board games were a big, big part of American culture for many, many years. Gosh, going back to the 20s, and right up until the 90s, they still have board games. You can still buy brand new board games, you know. And board games are very simply, just to give you a quick idea of what board games are, is very simply a game usually played by 2, 3, 4, or more players. And you sit down at a kitchen table or at a coffee table or whatever you happen to have. You sit down and you take the board out of the box, and everybody has a player, and there's different ways to advance and win points or whatever it happens to be. And you play with your friends and family. And it's exciting. It can be competitive. You know, I've played a lot of board games in my life, and I can remember more than once we got into little arguments. You might almost call them fights, but certainly arguments, and exciting, and oh, come on, come on. And sometimes you have partners, and sometimes you don't. But essentially what it was, it meant there were a couple of hours of time when the family or group of friends got together, and they shared experiences, and they laughed and had a really good time. It's called socializing. Social media, you know what social media is today. It's not socializing, you know. That's not socializing. Socializing is being with your friends or with your family, talking to people, strangers or not. That's socializing. I don't get into it, but I sometimes worry about the future where people think that socializing is punching keys on a mobile. People are starting to learn or starting to lose the ability to meet people and to talk to people intelligently, but hopefully it'll sort out. But board games were a big, big feature. A lot of times in the 50s and 60s, there was no television. What? Not television? Yeah, and when we did get television, we had to walk up the TV to turn it on. And we had to walk back to the TV to change the volume. We had to walk back up the TV to change the channel because there were no remotes. I know you guys are under 30 years of age, you think I'm laughing. I'm making fun of you, but no. Board games, scuba diving board games. Every different activity had its own board game. So there are board games for TV heroes. And there's Monopoly, probably one of the most famous board games ever created and very popular even today. Clue and Sorry. I know these names mean nothing to most of you, but they were great board games and they were just wonderful. And it's board games that still made it. But there were lots of board games for scuba now. I want to show you just 2 or 3 today very quickly. Now this particular board game is called the Aquanuts. And this was one of those combination board games. What I mean by that is it had a couple of themes. First of all, the Aquanauts was a TV show. So this is a board game that's based on a TV series, a very, very popular TV series, starring a very handsome young man. He also played a number of westerns at the time. And there's a picture of the actual actor wearing scuba. In this case, he didn't have on his 10-gallon hat, and he's not carrying his guns in this picture. He's underwater. He played different roles. But this is an actor from a well-known TV series called the Aquanauts. Very, very popular in the 50s and early 60s. And you can see there's sharks and scuba divers and spear guns and knives and all the essential, exciting things that make scuba diving a lot of fun. So that's what the board looked like. Now you can imagine a young person going into a game store or seeing this in the Christmas catalog and maybe really excited about scuba diving as I was, and look, oh mom, look, it's only $3, mom. Well, $3, you know, people were making like 75 cents an hour. $3 was not an inconsequential amount back then. $3 is nothing today. You throw it away. I don't, but you maybe do. But anyway, you know, oh, Mom, I want that game, I want that game. And so maybe for Christmas he'd be lucky enough to have Santa Claus deliver him the Aquanauts board game. What did he get? Well, first of all, typically for board games, you got a lid. And typically for board games, on the back of the lid were the instructions. Not this one. This is an older style, but this is a lid. And it had all kinds of exciting and interesting things all around the lid. I'm going to stand that up over there and take a look at what's in the board game box. Well, it wouldn't be a board game if you didn't have a board. You had to have a board. well, not all of them had boards, but 99% of them had boards. And the board was, oh, Mom, I love this game. Thank you, Santa. And this was the board, Aquanuts, underwater adventure game. And so, particularly if you watch Aquanauts on TV, this meant a lot to them. And so you can see on here, there's all kinds of neat stuff. There's a path around the outside. You go back and you pick up some treasure, and there's all types of salvage and stuff. Now, this particular one has to do with salvage. And this particular one, the object here was to recover underwater articles that have been lost, treasure, or maybe anchors, or old wrecks, or things of value. And so, you see, you had the board, and that was pretty straightforward. But then inside the box, there was other things as well, pretty typical for board games. There was usually a spinner. We called them spinners. You see it here? Can you see there, Kev? See the spinner? This has a couple of spinners because it depends on what you have in your hands. So there's a spinner. And then each player, this particular game was for 4 players, each player had his own man. We used to call him a man. Now, sometimes a man was a little wine glass. Sometimes a man, like a Monopoly, a man could be a little car. But it was called a man because it is the object that you, the person playing, moved around the board. So this particular one's kind of neat because these men were like divers, you see? And they had a little base, and you put your diver head into the base. And now the diver head would stand up on the board, and you can move them around the board. As you won things, you can move them around. You see, just like this. I know it sounds silly, but God darn, it was exciting back in those days. And so they had cards, and you would pull a card out, and you take a spin, and to see what you could pick up off the bottom. And when you found something off the bottom, you got points for it, and you would put one of these little squares, all kinds of them, one of these little squares on that spot. And the square says taken, you see? So that treasure is taken. Nobody else can take it. That's yours. And off you go, and maybe half an hour, 45 minutes later, one of you would have taken all of the stuff, and nobody else can win the game, and the game is over, and the red diver is the winner. I know, it sounds pretty boring compared to Xbox. But first of all, it was social. You got to play with your friends. You can't do that with not usually anyway, and your family, right? Your mom, and your dad, and your sister, and brother, and so on. I wonder how many of you have done that lately. Sat down and had an exciting little game with your family. Anyway, these were wonderful things. And there's an example of a board game from the 50s and 60s based on scuba. The Aquanauts, underwater adventure game based on the TV series The Aquanauts. Now let's look at another game. It's also based on a fairly well-known program. This was actually based on the, don't mind this over here. This is just to hold the games up. I used some of my Paddy awards. They're good for that. The Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. Now, if you're over 40 years of age, this might ring a bell with you. If you're over 60, of course, you probably know the entire story. But Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea was a movie that came out many years ago, and it was a fantastic movie, very, very famous at the time. And then I think they actually had a TV series based on this as well afterwards. But anyway, the point is that this was an underwater adventure movie and series. And you can see they had helicopters and cars and people diving on motorcycles and police and submarines and fish flying for some reason, submarines and everything else. And this was a board game for ages 7 to 15. So you had to be a bit grown up for this one. And that's the perfect age for aspiring scuba divers. I started diving when I was 10, first time I tried diving. And I was certified at 12. And so that was just that right time. And this was just an exciting game. And this is very similar. So in this one, you take the cover off and set that over there again. And once again, what's the standard format? What's in the box? Well, it has to be a board. Wouldn't be a board game without a board, and there's the board for this one. Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. And here's the two, these actually look reminiscent of the two actors, and I forget the names of the actors. Was Lloyd Bridges in this one? I can't remember the names. Or was it, who was it that plays in NCIS, the doctor? Anyway, but there's the two actors, and here's a submarine that's surfacing, doesn't look too healthy. An underwater mine, and this looks like a bad guy looking through a pair. And there's a diver in a pink suit. That's kind of neat, I guess. Oh, there's another submarine and a missile, a torpedo heading towards it. A couple of divers in Arctic clothing, and rays and sharks. Wow, this is exciting. How do you play this? Well, what you do is you get the instructions. First of all, you read the instructions there right here. It tells you exactly what to do. And it's really pretty straightforward. The players each get a submarine, you see. These are, you punch these out. and there's a little submarine. Oops, I just punched it out. Didn't want to do that, but it came out. There's a little submarine. And a red one, there's a blue one, and different colors. And then, based on the rules, you know, you decide who's going to go first. And with the rules, you decide, and there's rules in there and explains what to do. And then when you're ready to go, you use the spinner. Got to have the spinner, right? Board game, right? Spin, and 4. And you look and see 4. Oh, I get to move 4, whatever it is, 4 places, or I get to pick up 4 things, and on you go. And you follow the rules of the game, and the different players move around the game, and they pick up various points. And that's how you play the game. Again, a well-known TV show, movie and TV show, and the board game that goes with it. And I think this, I'm going to guess this is from the late 60s, early 70s, somewhere in that area. Let's look at another one that's also quite famous. There was a team, husband and wife team, Hans and Lotte Hass. Now, I'm pretty sure I'm right that both Hans and Lotte Hass are gone now. I know that Hans is, and I think Lotte has died just recently. But Hans and Lotte Hass were famous divers from Europe, and they were very, very famous divers and photographers and videographers. And they were among the very, very first, at the same time as Jacques Cousteau, to video the incredibly exciting and beautiful marine environment that we enjoy so much as scuba divers. And they were very, very well known in the 60s and the 70s. And at that time, they were so well known that somebody came along and said, why don't we make a board game based on your adventures? And so this is the Undersea Adventure game by Hans and Lotte Hass, with 72 full-colored cards with photography. This is a little bit newer, so it's a little bit different, but let me just quickly show you about this. And you'll see now this one has the instructions on the back cover. That's the way they normally were at the time. And whoa, this is pretty exciting. What have we got here? Look at this, huh? Whoa, this is pretty good. So here's a board, and I noticed that this board is what we call an action board. By action board, what I mean is that the board itself, this board thing here, actually moves. You see, you put your finger in here, and it moves. You see that? You can make it move. I'm not exactly sure what the benefit of that is. I haven't read the instructions, but let's take a peek here and see. So we have some cards, and the little man, okay, so I'll be a green diver. Look at that. This is obviously for up to six divers, and so you put your green, I'll put them on the green there, right there, and away we go. And there's a dice, a single dice, half of a dice is a die, right? Whatever. There's a die, and a lot of these later board games, rather than the spinner, you used to spin to get 4. Well, now you would take the dice and go, oh, 6, and you get to a certain number. And then based on what you got, the instructions would tell you what to do. Then you could pick up one of these cards. And these are beautiful cards. I suspect that these cards, Kevin, I don't know if you can get close to these. I suspect that these cards are some of the pictures from Hans and Lotte Hass. That's Hans right there, where I used to spear a beautiful dolphin fish for dinner, and some other fish as well. Various things, and ship's lamps. Oh, they're on a shipwreck, and they recovered some ship's lamps. So the object of this game, you see, is to travel around the board with the spinner when you take your turn. And if you play well and are fortunate, a little bit of luck involved, then you would get certain fish and certain artifacts from underwater. And the first person to achieve a certain number would be the winner of the game. And it was an evening of fun. And it was an evening of fun as well. That was, remember as well, the reason I'm here and talking to you was an evening of fun, all based on scuba diving. Yeah. So obviously these particular games are particularly good if you're camping somewhere. Maybe you're diving on the quarries in Ohio, or maybe you're in the Great Lakes up in Tobermory, or in BC, or someplace a little bit remote. Heck, even down south. I tell you what. Next time you're down south, Cozumel or Cayman or someplace, if you have one of these games, take it with you. Put a plastic bag, tuck in your luggage, just thin, and get down south. And you know how usually in the evenings you sit around at night and you tell stories and have a couple of drinks maybe and socialize? Pull out your board game. I'd be willing to bet you that the divers sitting around with you down there would say, wow, what's that? And they'd have a good time. This is a little newer. One more to show you. Secrets of the Deep. Untold riches are waiting to be found. Can you retrieve the sunken treasure before time runs out? Oh, look at that. And there's a diver. Now, he's a much more modern diver. And there's a ship. Look at that shipwreck. Wow, I've seen hundreds of shipwrecks over my 60 years of scuba diving. I've never seen one like that. It looks like it just sank. My goodness gracious. And that's a picture. It's pretty nice. Fish. Oh, there's a treasure chest. Look at that. There's gold in it. You can see the gold, the spear gun. This has got everything. that a diver finds exciting. Everything is in here. Look at that, huh? And so let's see what's involved here. And so you take this, and once again, you open it up, and there's let's just see if it's a real board game. You know what it has to have to be a board game. Let me see what's in here. Look at this. This looks like a board. Let me just see here, Kevin. Oh yeah, this is a board. Okay, so it's definitely a board game. Ah, this is neat. Look at this. The spinner. You know the spinner? The spinner is a ship's wheel. Now that's pretty neat. You give it a spin, and three. I got three. And oh boy, this looks exciting. The book with instructions. They actually have a separate book of instructions. Looks pretty easy. Book of instructions. Even the book of instructions is exciting. And there's a ship that you can dive from. You see, goes on there, and each diver. Oh boy, you got triple tanks and double tanks. And these little player men here, cards. You've lost your lamp. Dive immediately and break it to the bottom. Okay. You just found a treasure chest with gold. Kevin, let's wrap this up. I want to play. Anyway, guys, board games. They were a lot of fun. And a part of scuba diving history as well. We actually used to play a lot of these. And if you've seen some of these, you might be excited to know that they even existed. You might be, wow, board games about scuba diving. Well, now you've learned something. Maybe some of you recognize them. The Aquanauts, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. Maybe look some of those up on Google and get some more information. But there's some board games, and they were a lot of fun. I have dozens, well, not dozens, but maybe 20 of different board games, all about scuba diving. Some about Sea Hunt. You may have seen those on Sea Hunt. I showed you some of those. And other games as well. Anyway, there you go. Board games. Vintage board games about scuba diving. I hope you enjoyed it. I got to go. Kevin and I are going to sit down and play a game. Thanks for watching, divers. Take care. Talk to you soon. Alec, Peirce, Vintage Scuba.